All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll ask everyone to please silence their cell phones at this time as we'll get started with the third meeting of the Disaster Prevention and Resiliency Task Force. And we thank everyone for being here this morning. And Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Herron, Senator Howell, Senator Maiden, here. Senator Reed,
here.
Representative Blanton, Representative Hart,
here.
Representative Tackett Lafferty, Representative Whitaker, here. Co-Chair Webb, Co-Chair Freeland.
Present. All right, we do have a quorum duly qualified to constitute to do business this morning. And can we have a motion to adopt the August meeting minutes? And a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. And all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, no. The minutes are adopted. And the agenda items, we have our first presenter this morning from the Kentucky Mesonet. And I'll probably butcher the name here, but it's Dr. Jerry Brodsky is with us via Zoom this morning, and we'll ask you to share your screen. Are you with us this morning? I can see a little picture of you. Ask you to unmute your mic there. Can you unmute your mic, sir?
Okay, it should be unmuted now. It should be good to talk.
Can you hear us?
You're speaking to me?
Yep, there you go. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. All
Yes,
right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know you've got a class to prepare for, so we'll let you go ahead and present. We appreciate you being with us this morning.
Great. Thank you very much. Just technical, should I share my screen on this end?
Yes, please do.
Great. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, we sure can. You go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, I know we're limited on time, but very quickly, I know I provided a lot of slides, but so I'll go through a lot of the slides rather quickly, but feel free to ask questions as we go through this. I'll talk on two different entities. First, the Kentucky Mesonet, and then I'll follow up with a few slides on the Kentucky Climate Center, which is kind of the umbrella organization to the Mesonet. So very quickly, just in case you've not heard of the Kentucky Climate Center, it's basically an umbrella organization that includes both the State Climate Office as well as the Kentucky Mesonet. And it also has a fairly substantial research and development program. And the Kentucky Climate Center is one of 13 centers within what's called the Applied Research and Technology Program, and otherwise known as ARTP. And that is a Center of Excellence sponsored by the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. So you may have heard of that. So, but the Kentucky Climate Center is one of those 13 centers within WKU. So just a quick fact sheet on the Kentucky Mesonet, in case you're not familiar with that. It is what we consider a high quality environmental network. We currently have 84 stations deployed statewide, and we're continuing to add to that. We have both a web display, with the example shown there at the bottom, as well as both a iOS app as well as an Android app that's available for download. And we make those available because of mobile users such as farmers and emergency managers can access that data from the field. We've also produced over 100 different value-added products that we have available from the website. And again, I'll show some examples of that, but that's just different ways of presenting the data in various ways. We now have over 1 billion observations available going back to the start of the program, and so those are all freely available for download for education, emergency management, and such. All of our data is collected in real time, and that's available to users such as the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service actually ingests all of this data into the numerical models in real time. And so all the weather forecasts for the state of Kentucky are improved by the ingestion of this real-time data feed. Here's a list of some of the variables that we collect at each of the stations every 5 minutes from across the state at all 84 stations. We measure everything from air temperature, precipitation, solar radiation. I've highlighted in yellow some of the infrastructure and some of the variables that we've upgraded over the last few years, largely as a result, direct result of the new funding provided by the legislature. We have outfitted all of the Mesonet sites now with soil temperature, soil data. That's been helpful for both the flooding and the drought situations that we've had. We've also added cameras at all the sites. And we've done that because that helps with situational awareness, helps with just understanding the quantitative data that we have coming in. We've also been able to upgrade a lot of the basic infrastructure, what we call the data logger, which is the computer on board each site, as well as the communications and electrical power systems at each site. They had, over the last 10 to 15 years, they degraded, and that was starting to impact the quality of the data that we had coming in. So we've been able to upgrade a lot of that with this new funding from the state. This is a map of our current map of the stations that we have operating. We have 84 stations. We have 78 counties now with at least one Mesonet station. And we continue to grow this out. We have we've added 3 new stations this year. We'll add 2 more stations this year. And again, that's we're able to expand the network because of this new funding. Previously, individual counties had to put up the initial money for a station. Now we're able to really go into those counties that didn't have that initial funding. So this is a map showing those counties that have stations. They're colored in red. We've added the 3 counties in green we've added this year: Hancock, Spencer, Powell counties. And then we hope to add Floyd and Trimble counties to that this fall. So we've added, I hope to add 5 new stations this year, and we hope to keep that trend up as we go forward. Our goal, of course, is eventually to have at least 1 station in every county. Some of these counties have never had a weather station in their county ever, going back to 1895 when we started collecting weather observations. So we're well on the path to achieving this. Again, by the end of the year, we hope to have 2/3 of counties covered with at least 1 weather station. So some of the products that we create from this data, again, some of these were requested by the National Weather Service, some emergency managers, and so we've just tried to create products that are of value. Here are just some examples. Here's year to date, and this year started off as the wettest year on record. You see some of these stations have over 50 inches, which is our annual average for the year. Here's a precipitation since midnight, which can be valuable during a flooding situation. Consecutive days with less than 1/10 of an inch of rainfall. And this was helpful in developing our weekly drought monitor. You see some counties there had gone well over a month with virtually no rainfall. Here's consecutive hours with more than 1/4 inch of rainfall. Again, helpful during flooding scenarios. We've created several climate products to just kind of get a feel for just how extreme a particular episode or series of events are compared to average. This is a temperature map for a particular station, and this shows the average highs and lows for each day of the year, going back to the beginning of the calendar year for that particular station. The all-time high is marked by the top red line, the all-time low for that station is marked in the blue. And you can just get a sense of, during heat waves or particular cold spells, how it compares to normal and compared to previous years. And this is a similar graph showing cumulative rainfall. And this year, again, started off as the wettest year on record. This is from Warren County. And you see we were 14 inches above normal. The normal line is this diagonal line across the middle. And if you've got an average wet year, you'll be following that line. But this year we started off with the flooding episodes in February and April, and you see these big jumps up. And then the flat line is the lack of rainfall we've seen over the last couple of months. So we've just tried to capture some of this data in different ways. So it can be useful. And in addition to the graphics, we also have a number of tables and line plots available. Again, users typically make a request, and then we'll try and create a product based upon their needs. One addition that we've been able to add to the network, again, directly as a result of the state funding, is that we've outfitted every station with a camera. And so every 5 minutes, as we collect data, we also take a snapshot from that station. And we archive all of those images. And so if you request data, we also have the photographs to go along with that data. We've enabled the ability for the National Weather Service or emergency managers to have access to a real-time streaming, so that if there is a warning approaching a particular station, we can turn that a user can go to the website and access that real-time data stream, and then they can watch the storm come in. We don't have the ability to move the cameras, so in some sense, you just have to watch the radar and see if the camera is pointing in the right direction. But we do have this real-time streaming set up, and we've provided a lot of the media across the state with this capability as well. So just as a few examples of what we can do for emergency management, above all, it provides a real-time situational awareness. Is these two examples here from the February and April examples. Here's a map showing the total rainfall across the state for the February event. And we have at least one camera here that pointed to a field before it flooded during that event. And you see some areas received over 6 inches of rainfall during that 2-day event. Another example from the April event, some areas received over 15 inches of rainfall during that 4 days. And here again is another example where we had a station not too far from a river where the river rose and flooded that field. And this is from April 6th from a station, and you can see the impact there. But we also, again, all of this data is assimilated into numerical models. It also provides ground truth for what we're seeing in the data. And not shown here, but from the data can help with measuring, intense rainfall events, severe wind events, icing, drought situations. So there's a lot of different situations where this data can be helpful. Now, very quickly, I wanted to say a few words about the Kentucky Climate Center, because we are doing a lot of disaster research, a lot of research that can help disaster operations. The Climate Center, well, the State Climate Office was founded by the state in 1978. The federal government decided to get out of the climate business, and so most states formed their own state climate office. And that's why we're here. And we work with a lot of the state agencies across the state, and I'll show some examples of that. And but we also work with a lot of federal agencies as well, such as the National Weather Service. Now, just a few examples of some of that research that we're doing. This is, we've created a climate library of high impact events. And so you can go to our website and click on Kentucky Climate, and you'll get this, what we call a Kentucky timeline. And you can click on the decade of interest, and you'll get a list of all the different high impact events that occurred during that decade. We're still adding to this, but we think it's fairly complete. This was made possible by an NSF grant that we received. And so, but it's a living document. And so as events happen, we'll continue to add to this. And we hope to make this much more comprehensive as we go forward. We also have we're working on visualizing that climate library, and we call it CLOC, Climate Library for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And this was made for by another NSF grant. And what you have here is all the severe weather events recorded across the state. In this case, tornado data going back to 1880. And eventually you'll be able to go to this site and not only be able to download that data, but you'll also be able to visualize that data, both spatially and temporally. And so no other state has anything like this. And so going forward, we really hope to lead the nation in creating this both quantitative as well as visual library for disaster research. Another product that we're working on is developing an early indicator of flash drought. This is taking advantage of the Mesonet in the sense of at all 84 of those Mesonet stations now, we record both soil temperature and soil moisture at 5 different depths. And so we collect that data, and what we have here is we've developed a variable that we're calling the percent soil saturation index. And basically what that means is it puts that soil data into a historical perspective. And so the 100% on this plot is the wettest that station's ever been. 0% is the driest that station's ever been. And as we see the data drop, as shown by these lines here, that means it's of course drying out relative to its historical averages. And the colors behind those lines show the drought index for that period. And so sure enough, as you see those lines drop, you see those colors start to highlight. And that means that we're starting to designate certain areas of the state as in drought. And so by using a tool like this, by taking advantage of the Mesonet, we can start maybe seeing some early indicators of drought, and then we can start acting on that. And then finally, we are working with the Department of Public Health on developing what we call a wet bulb globe temperature. A lot of schools across the state are already using this to cancel soccer practice or cancel football practice, and it's a better measure of how the heat and humidity impact the human body, and it's much better than the traditional heat index as shown here on the right. So here's an example where on a particular day, the heat index was showing, close to 100 or slightly over 100, not quite in the danger zone, but pretty hot. On the left is our wet bulb globe temperature for that same period, and we see that actually using a wet bulb globe temperature, you're actually in a high threat, and students shouldn't be practicing outside in that heat and humidity. And so it's just a better measure of the human body's reaction to that heat and the precautions that should be taken. Again, a lot of schools already use this. We're getting this onto the Mesonet website, and we'll be actually producing this in real time for the Department of Public Health. And they're already ingesting some of our maps internally for use from the Mesonet. So that is a very fast summary of some of the products and some of the value that the Kentucky Mesonet provides, but also some of that research that the Kentucky Climate Centers now are working to develop. Do you have any questions?
All right. Well, thank you, Doctor. We're not seeing any questions at this time, but a lot of information, a lot of great information. The only question that I have is on the Mesonet stations, the counties that do not have the stations. Is there anything that we can do as reps and senators to help encourage these counties to get these stations?
Sure. If there are any counties without stations, they're feel free to have their county judge executives or emergency managers reach out to me directly, or our center, and we'd be happy to start that process of finding a new station in your county. Generally, we need a 30 by 30 square foot area in a relatively flat, open area. Pastures make for good sites. K through 12 schools make for excellent partners. And inevitably, a lot of the stations, a lot of the counties we have left are kind of in the eastern third of the state. And that's mostly just because it's tougher to find a flat, non-forested area in those locations. But we are working through with a number of counties already that don't have stations, but absolutely have those counties reach out to me directly. And one other comment, I just wanted to say that the timing of the funding to the Mesonet over the last 5 years has been just really much needed because of both the timing of so much of the severe weather that we've seen over the last 5 years, but also with the decrease in the National Weather Service funding, we've been able to kind of step up and help them in a number of different ways across the state. So the timing has really worked out well.
All right. Well, thank you. We do have one question before you go, Doctor. Representative Whitaker. You might have to switch mics.
Okay.
It's not your fault.
No, I thought I was talking too loud. So, do you know what the cost of a new station is? If we wanted to, I see that the pointiest part of Pike County doesn't have anything anywhere nearby, and I'd love to get some in these areas that are missing out.
Right. The approximate cost of an installation of a new station is about $50,000. But with the funding that we have already from the legislature, we do have funding for roughly 5 new sites per year, and maybe more in some years. So that's something that we can consider. In fact, we are actually already considering a second site for Pike County because it is so large, and your current site isn't really representative of where a lot of the people are living there in Pike County. So we'd definitely like one a little further east for sure.
Thank you.
Great point.
Thank you, Representative. Well, thank you, Doctor, and I appreciate the presentation this morning and all the great information. I know you got to get to your class, so we'll let you do that.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And our next presenter, we'll let him come to the table. It's Ryan Drain with the long-term recovery, or actually with Blue Skies, the founding principal, with a product called DARCI, and also Chris McGeevy. There we go. All right, and also Chris McGeevy, as you just heard his name several times. And while they're getting ready, I do want to recognize a guest in our audience this morning, Theodore Meyer, and also Eric Patterson with the Kentucky Colonels. Theodore is one of the board members, and they're here this morning. Just want to thank the Kentucky Colonels for all the great work they do for disaster recovery and throughout our state for all types of endeavors. So just to help me welcome them and all the great work our Kentucky Colonels do. So. All right. If you gentlemen are ready, I'll let you introduce yourselves and begin.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Make sure your mic is bright green.
It's on now. Thank you very much. My name is Ryan Drain. I am the principal of Blue Sky Global and DARCI. And before that, my journey actually started as the first executive director of the Mayfield-Grays County Long-Term Recovery Group after the December 2021 tornado. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to come here today and speak and educate you guys about some of our learnings, not just from West Kentucky and what we've experienced, but our opportunities to work across the United States.
Thanks, Ryan. My name is Chris McGreevy. I'm Director of Long-Term Recovery Operations for the American Red Cross, one of several that hold that position. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to join you all today and speak, and for Mr. Drain for inviting me to speak alongside him. So I'll give you a little bit of background on myself and then why I'm here to speak with you as well. But I joined the American Red Cross as a volunteer in 2010 when I served my Northern Kentucky neighbors in Boone County, small-scale disasters as a volunteer. Joined as a paid staff in 2022, June of 2022, in long-term recovery as a deputy director of long-term recovery for the December 21 Quad State tornadoes, also leading and helping to lead the Eastern Kentucky floods and the Waverly, Tennessee tornadoes. Floods, Waverly, Tennessee floods, before moving into my current role as director, where I now lead the Helene, North Carolina, and Tennessee recovery efforts for the American Red Cross. I've deployed and supported in response to the transition from response to recovery to the Maui wildfires, the 2023 Mississippi tornadoes, and the 24 Iowa and Nebraska floods. If you're not familiar with the American Red Cross, our mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. And a lot of people are familiar with what we do in the initial phases and in response to disasters. It's very visible when we open shelters and things like that. My department is a little bit lesser known, so we're going to talk a little bit about the work that we do in long-term recovery. I'll start by giving a brief introduction of our program, but the Red Cross is currently supporting 7 long-term recovery operations across the United States. Our branch is a branch of the National Headquarters Disaster Cycle Services Department. and you can see some of our current operations on the slide right now. Our program is a little bit lesser known in that we are what's called a When Resources Allow program. And that means that our designated donations after a disaster exceed the cost that we spend during response, during that initial response phase. So we'll stand up a long-term recovery operation when resources allow to provide ongoing support to individuals and communities in their recovery for 2 to 3 years after the disaster. This allows our team to focus on the work of the disaster recovery while our local chapters and regions continue responding to daily disasters and prepare for what's to come. Our support in long-term recovery often includes additional rounds of direct financial assistance to impacted families. We act as a facilitator and a convener with partners to help local long-term recovery stakeholders establish long-term recovery groups or similar committees to ensure collaboration and coordination amongst stakeholders. And I know you've heard from some of our colleagues previously about some of that long-term recovery work that's happened in Western Kentucky. We often support recovery organizations in their work through our grant program, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But the goal there is to meet the most pressing recovery needs identified through our needs assessment and through our ongoing engagement with long-term recovery groups. Finally, we invest in preparedness education and community-based programs to help impacted households and communities be better prepared and more resilient for future disasters. As a disaster relief organization, we can attest to the fact that disasters are happening more often and with greater frequency. In the 1980s, there were fewer than $10 billion disasters in the United States compared to more than 25 in 2023. We've also observed the time between these disasters decreased to less than 8 days between billion-dollar disasters in 2023. You have plenty of time, right? Not only are disasters occurring more frequently, but they're having repetitive impacts on communities and families. One example of that is Clara. Clara's home outside of Dawson Springs was destroyed by the December 2021 tornadoes in Kentucky. She placed her grandchildren in a bathtub as the storm approached, and the home was destroyed, and the bathtub was thrown from the house. But Clara and her grandkids miraculously survived unharmed. The emotional moment when her grandchildren were found safe amidst the debris in the flipped-over bathtub was captured on body camera footage by the Hopkins County Sheriff's Department. Clara received immediate financial assistance from the Red Cross following the tornadoes, and on a broader level, the long-term recovery team recognized Clara and the community lacked basements or safe storm shelters, and in response provided a grant to the Community Foundation of West Kentucky to build 130 storm shelters in the affected communities. This proved critical when the same area was hit by tornadoes in 2024. Clara's home was tragically destroyed again in the spring of 2024 by those tornadoes, but her grandchildren and her family were safe in a shelter at her neighbor's home that was provided through the Red Cross grant. In addition to the storm shelter program, she also received immediate assistance and support from disaster health services following that disaster. There are lots more Claras in the Commonwealth and across the country, and that's just one story that I thought, and by the way, it's the first time I've ever told it without tearing up, so kudos to me, I guess. But really impactful story that I wanted to share with you all today. So across the 4 impacted states that were in the December 21 tornadoes, the American Red Cross granted more than $18 million in community recovery grants. Of those, funding nearly 20 positions, one of those was funding nearly 20 positions across 16 long-term recovery groups to allow for the hiring of key positions like the directors, construction, and casework managers. Working with the Community Foundation of West Kentucky, we provided support of the initial design of DARCI, which we saw as a tool to meet many of the needs that I will discuss in just a moment, some of our key learnings, and to help build resiliency in impacted Western Kentucky communities. The Red Cross, as a founding member of the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, or NVOAD, believes in locally led, partner-supported recovery efforts and helps to convene long-term recovery groups alongside our VOAD members and state and federal stakeholders. Bringing all the organizations with material, people power, and resources together in an organized fashion ensures equitable recovery and reduces duplication of benefits and reduces the effort to help survivors. In this approach, also helps to reduce the time families spend in congregate and temporary housing solutions, helping them return to safe, sanitary, and secure housing, which also has a positive impact on survivors' mental health following a disaster. When not done well, families often become frustrated, give up on rebuilding, and many will relocate out of the area, oftentimes leading to families becoming separated and recovering apart. In North Carolina, nearly a year after Helene, we're still identifying organizations that are providing support and who are not part of the organized long-term recovery efforts. And our team is working alongside our colleagues and FOAD partners to bring them to the table. Reaching survivors in need following a disaster is often a challenge. In Mayfield, families were presenting nearly 3 years after the disaster to the long-term recovery group. And finally, another key learning, every time a survivor seeks assistance from another partner, they often have to retell their story. This can be burdensome and triggering and cause mental health concerns to many individuals that have been struggling to recover from disasters altogether. With that, I think those are some key things that Mr. Drain will speak more to as he discusses the DARCI program.
Thank you, Chris. And those stories and images are things that have been burned into everyone's mind who's had a community that's been impacted by disasters. It's certainly been burned into mine and really changed the trajectory of my life to focus and working and how can we make this better. When I started as the director of the long-term recovery group, we had about 4,000 households in Graves County that we had to go through. And I sat down with the more than 60 or 70 partner organizations that showed up at our doorstep and were wonderful. And I said, where's the program that we can help to lead these folks through recovery? And there wasn't one. One didn't exist. We had some Excel spreadsheets. We had some great PDFs, great guidance by people that have been doing it for decades, but there wasn't a program that existed. So we spent the last 3.5 years pounding round pegs into square holes. And I think after decades and decades of recovery and storms, that not only the people of the Commonwealth, but people that are impacted by storms in general deserve better. And we made it our mission to see how we could increase efficiency, decrease time in recovery, and that's where we came up with DARCI, which stands for Disaster Aware and Ready Communities Initiative. And it was created by people like myself and many others across the country. We didn't create it in a silo. As a matter of fact, DARCI is meant to tear down silos, as Chris mentioned, that exist in recovery and only extend the trauma that the people have to go through. We've worked with organizations, dozens of organizations, from municipalities to community foundations, donors, long-term recovery groups, and thousands of survivors to vet and to talk about what's needed. And one of the things that I want to focus on is that this wasn't just listening sessions that we had. These were actually lived experiences like my own and like others in my community, to where we all got together and said, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a more unified approach. So DARCI does offer centralized tools that support preparedness, response, and recovery all in one place. And it's built on a foundation of trust, transparency, and real-time coordination. DARCI shifts the power back to the survivors, because after a disaster, survivors lose everything. And the one thing that we want them to feel the power of is that they actually have some sort of say and some sort of control over something that's happened to them that could be the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their life. So we designed DARCI to ensure that it's survivor-led and not system-led. And this trust-based approach, it's proven to save time, money, and to save lives. We offer it on 3 core platforms. We have Citizen Profiles, which is the first of its kind, where we have an app and a laptop or desktop application to where citizens can be engaged from preparedness all the way through recovery and back again. And I'll explain a little bit more of that as we go through. We have Partner Profiles, where we engage and work with local nonprofit organizations that are already there in the community meeting those needs and have that trust factor built in. And then we have Center Profiles, and those are your long-term recovery groups or your organizations that are charged with leading preparedness during blue sky times, so that when gray sky times come around, the community is ready to go and ready to help recover. So here's how it works. You've all seen the disaster cycle, and you all know Director Gibson, during one of the first presentations to this committee, had stated that Kentucky leads the nation in declared disasters over the last 15 years. And while that's something nobody wants to come in first from, it's something that we can grab a hold of as Kentuckians and say, you know what? We want to take what we're learning from these disasters and we want to lead the nation in other ways, in preparedness. We want to bring forth new and innovative ideas on how to shorten the time of recovery, on how to bring people back and bring communities back better than ever before. So one thing that makes DARCI truly unique than a lot of other programs is it actually works through the entire cycle, from preparedness all the way through long-term recovery and back into preparedness again. It can work in gray skies and blue skies, which is pre-disaster and post-disaster. In preparedness, it equips individuals, organizations, and communities before disaster strikes. During activation, it's activated locally, so you don't have to wait on the state or a federal declaration. Over 80% of disasters that happen in this country are not federally declared, and those people face the same challenges and the same impacts as the people that are in federally declared disasters. It changes their lives just the same. In response, it acts as a central hub for coordination. In case management, Chris was talking about the mental toll. It alleviates the requirement for the survivor to have to tell their story over and over and over again. And I can tell you, I've sat across the desk from 4 grown men who were the helpers in their communities. And they were one bad day away from ending it all, because they had to keep reliving it and reliving it and reliving it. And they were at the end of the rope, and they just needed a little bit of help. And the only difference between them and us, and this is what I would tell them, the only difference between you and me is you lived on a different street than I did. That's it. You did nothing to deserve this. We just happened to live on a different street. It could just as easily been me sitting in that chair. So let's find you some help. Let's give you a way. And that was really what sparked the fire in me to provide these people with a way in which they could regain some control over their situation. And then also in long-term recovery, it facilitates the collaboration between organizations, whether they're local or whether they're like the American Red Cross that comes in on a national or international scale. It organizes churches, local government, and VOADs. So let's talk about why preparation is critical. U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Allstate Foundation basically stated what the ROI is for preparedness. For every dollar invested in preparedness, it saves $13 in recovery costs and economic loss. And more than that, if you have something that saves lives, that's priceless. You could put money on economics and you could put money on, the recovery and the time, but something that can actually save lives, it's priceless. But what this does, and actually less than 4% of disaster dollars are dedicated to preparedness, yet it yields the highest ROI. So what happens is it's underfunded. It leaves communities, states, which we've seen and we're seeing right now, funders, nonprofit funders, and private organizations to bear the brunt of these longer and costlier recoveries. Because as Chris had mentioned, they're happening more often. And larger organizations are having to respond more. And donors are having to donate more. And there's fatigue there. So we have to work on ways in which we can prepare ourselves locally so we can recover faster. So this slide obviously didn't have its cup of coffee this morning, but preparation is also a top priority for emergency managers. This came from a July study from the International Emergency Management Association and National Emergency Management Association. Just over half of community emergency managers in the United States feel like they meet their community's needs. And this is a crisis. Well, we all know, and I'm sure the director could attest, that emergency management overall is underfunded. It's understaffed, especially for what we're facing now. But whenever they interviewed these emergency managers, they said, what do you want to spend your time on? What do you feel like you get the most value from? And they said they spend the most of their time on preparedness, but if they had more dollars and more funding, guess what? They would spend even more on preparedness. So let's talk about DARCI and preparedness and how it expands the network for local emergency managers without necessarily adding to the cost locally. DARCI provides a civic infrastructure that expands their capacity. It connects them, the emergency managers, with people in their communities that can help and assist during times of preparedness, during times of response, and during times of long-term recovery. So in the majority of the counties in Kentucky, we've got part-time or volunteer emergency managers, and they need a local network that's there to help them respond. It also organizes a long-term recovery group framework in each and every community that we go to. I can tell you from our experience, it took us 3 months from the date of the disaster until I actually started as director of the long-term recovery group. And that was actually fast, believe it or not. There were some groups it was 6 months, it was 9 months. I've been to other parts of the country where it was a year later and they're just starting with a long-term recovery group. Okay? And that's just not acceptable. We got to find a better way to be able to do that. And the better way to do that is to get the organizations and to get the framework set up before we even have a disaster. And then we provide a citizen platform to where not only the nonprofits are engaged, to where we've got the LTRG framework set up, but that every citizen in the community understands what they need to do to be better prepared. They understand what, if they are impacted, the alphabet soup that shows up. We have a extensive library that tells what are all these agencies, what do they do? And we walk them through complete response and recovery so they know exactly what's going on. So we try to make this simple, secure, and smart, and we've modeled it after my chart. You know, there's a lot with internet security and stuff that's going on these days. We offer the same security features that you would with a medical MyChart. So with our nonprofit partners and with our citizens, we offer a secure lockbox to where they can safely secure documents, photos of their driver's license, photos of their property before a disaster strikes. Because two of the main things that you have to prove out if you want to receive help is you got to prove out you are who you say you are and you lived where you said you lived. During the first couple of weeks, everybody can hand out hot dogs out of the trunk of their car and nobody is really asking any questions. But when it starts to getting into the trust and verify phase and time moves on, You've got to have these documents, and obtaining those documents when you've lost your entire home, that extends your recovery by months. But having a secure lockbox to where you can provide those documents is key. Another thing that we do when we come into a community and we work with the nonprofits is that we map all of the nonprofits. And you'll see this in a little bit more detail here in a minute. But we go to them and we say, what could you do in a disaster? How could you respond? Could you collect donations? Can you be a shelter? We map all of that and provide all the citizens and all the partners with an interactive map on their phone or on their PC to where they can go in and see what's being offered. And we also allow our partners to be able to change that in real time, because we know in response and recovery, things go in and out and things change. So it allows for the coordination of donations, but it also allows for those that need help to go and get it, and to get it from the right sources. And one of the most important things with DARCI is that the citizens have full control over who sees their data. Okay, I want to make sure that I make that point, that the citizen has full control over who sees their data. They can choose, like within their lockbox, if they want to share 1 or 2 items with an organization that's trying to provide assistance, they can do that, and they can do that instantaneously. Or that organization can say, hey, listen, we have to see a copy of your license, or we have to see a copy of your mortgage. They can show just those items. So they have complete control over who sees their data. The data component that we do collect that is extremely useful is the aggregate that we share out. So in disaster activation and response, we're able to provide real-time situational awareness. We've got live dashboards. When a disaster is declared, and it's declared locally, we send out a push notification to those that may have been impacted, and they respond. And as they respond to the damages and to their needs, it feeds into a centralized dashboard. And that dashboard isn't just hid away and held by one singular organization. Like I said before, we've got to break down those silos, because what happens is you've got 5 different data sets that are coming out of the singular disaster. Local officials don't know what to do. They don't know which one to use, So what we're trying to do is say, let's utilize a centralized data set that's coming directly from the people that are impacted. So we can start making smart and educated decisions. We can talk about where we need to deploy help immediately, and we can talk about where we need to reallocate resources. Again, those interactive maps, which I'll show you here in just a minute, and instant alerts that will save lives. We have the ability to allow the local community to send out push notifications in real time that can be as specific as they want to be. There's a gas leak on North 16th Street. The Kentucky River is rising at 2 feet every 10 minutes. If you live within a half a mile, you must evacuate in the next 20 minutes. Very, very specific life-saving information. I think about like some of the recent flooding in Texas, some of the flash flooding that they had. And if we could have been there to be able to send out those specific alerts, how many lives could have potentially been saved by that? We can also talk about road closures. You're not having to go on Facebook and try to find everything. It's coming directly to you, to your phone, so you can see it as a citizen and individual. Again, we're centralizing the coordination locally, allow it to be activated locally. We send out the damage surveys. We can track it across agencies in real time, and that reduces duplication. It reduces delays. It reduces confusion. We had a flood back in 2022 in Mayfield. The initial reports came out that there were 5 homes that were impacted. So what happened? Well, 5 homes, not necessarily as big of a deal. The volunteer groups and agencies that started to show up, they turned around and went home. We actually deployed some of the metrics and stuff we've incorporated into DARCI, I found out there were 139 homes that were impacted. 60% of those had already been impacted by the tornado. So now you have people that have been duly impacted within about an 18-month period. So what did we do? We utilized that data. We worked with Kentucky Emergency Management. They linked us up with volunteers and organizations that actually came back to help those people recover as well. This is an example, just a generic example of what the dashboards look like. Not only do we talk about home damage and needs, but we also talk about renters versus homeowners. We talk about where are you living? We lose so many people after a disaster because they go and live with relatives, or they're put in shelters, but we don't have the right MOUs in place to figure out, so that data can be shared. We allow the survivors themselves to be able to share that data locally, so that initial outpouring and outreach can go directly to them, and we can find them and help them. A lot of people live in homes in unsafe conditions. A lot of people that have medical conditions can't leave. We did a study after a tornado in West Kentucky. That was a few years later. Interacted a piece of this that now that we've integrated into DARCI. We found a week later that there were 5 homes where people were confined to their bed, were on dialysis, were on oxygen, that had not been checked in on, that no one knew about. Okay? This is life-saving stuff. And it's also providing the data and the information for local governments, for volunteer organizations to come, make decisions, react, and respond. You often hear the governor go on television for several days and say, hey, listen, we need to know your damage. Because even if you can self-recover, we need to get these designations. You might not be helping yourself, but you might be helping your neighbor if we can get these declarations. So we're able to capture all that data. It doesn't matter whether someone is self-recovering or whether they need help. It all flows in, and all the nonprofits, the local governments, emergency management, the long-term recovery groups, everyone is operating off the same data set. The other thing that we offer with the mapping that I said, and this happens in real time and can be changed in real time, survivors can go and they can go on the map and they can search and see what's available where. They can contact them. They've got their hours of operation. If you want to make donations that they call the disaster after the disaster, we had over 20 acres of water after the Mayfield tornado that we had to manage for about 8 months. We can alleviate the overabundance, and we can specialize and point people into the right direction of what's needed at that time. Without having to search on social media and Facebook, we can direct people directly to DARCI and see what agencies there on the ground, what they're needing. And furthermore, they can contact them and coordinate the efforts of delivery. This is a sample case to where we talk about duplication of services, which is a big deal, especially those that are offering and lending aid. If you're in the DARCI network as a citizen and you go to a DARCI partner, you have to allow them to see your assistance log. And we track this from day one. So they can see in this case that they had $30,000 estimate to repair their roof. Insurance covered for $20,000. They received money, $5,000 from a church. So they've got $5,000 in unmet needs. Our system tracks that in real time all the way through the recovery and keeps those things updated as they're updated constantly, continuously through the recovery. So we don't have to continuously survey, because I had people calling me literally every day for months saying, what are your needs? Okay, we're looking at doing roofs. How many roofs do you have? What's going to be the cost of that? What's the damage look like? Now I could go in and say, okay, We have 50 roofs that are left. We have an unmet need of $365,000 to repair those roofs. We can drill down to that level of data, and it's all on the aggregate. Again, with real-time updates, it's controlled locally. You can send it out to every DARCI user in the county. You can send it out to just your partner network, or you can send it out to those that have been impacted. Hey, last day for FEMA applications is today. The Disaster Recovery Center is opening today, or it's closing. So, or like I mentioned before, if there's a warning or an emergency, you can send these out directly to your community. Through case management, we track cases because it's fully integrated. We track cases from day one, from their needs, their assistance, their damage, all the way through the recovery. So again, they don't have to continuously tell their story. The way the case management works right now is when you finally get in to see a case manager, which sometimes 6 months, sometimes it's a year or longer. Sometimes people wait years. They're just now starting some case management for Helene and Milton in some states. And it's almost been a year. When you sit down with your case manager, they say, okay, tell us your personal information. Here's the documentation we need. What damage did you have and what assistance have you received? Well, if you're within DARCI, you've already got all of that. And this is going to save 2 to 3 months alone off of your recovery. You can go ahead and upload the documents that you need in real time. It eliminates duplicated intake across agencies, so you're not sending your private information, just your tax returns and everything everywhere. And it keeps all the support efforts in one place because we all need to be rowing this boat in the same direction. I equate it to the life of a survivor after a disaster is similar to this. Imagine if you were in an automobile accident and first responder arrived on the scene and you had to tell them what happened and tell them where you were hurting. And then the police arrived on the scene and you had to tell them what happened and you had to tell them where you're hurting. And then EMT arrived on the scene and you had to tell them the same thing. And none of them were talking to each other. And then you had to tell the ambulance driver where to take you. And then when you got to the hospital, you had to tell the emergency room doctor the same thing over again. And then when you got into surgery, you had to tell the same thing again. You had to relive it again. Then when you get into recovery in internal medicine or into rehabilitation, it's the same thing over and over and over again. Case management helps out a lot with that, but you can see how fragmented that process would be. But that's what survivors experience on a day in and day out basis across the entire country. Obviously, we track through intake until cases are closed because it is fully integrated. We can spot who's stuck and respond faster to them and help them. And we prioritize cases based on need and complexity, based on what assistance is currently available and how much assistance that they need to actually recover. And it's designed for long-term recovery groups. One of the things that we do when we go into communities is if they don't have a long-term recovery group, we work with them to help establish a long-term recovery group and set their framework up and then wrap that in to the DARCI program. So from a preparedness standpoint, they're ready. We have a full implementation plan and marketing materials where we go from all the way from emergency management and local government all the way down to the citizen level. And this is proven to work. A lot of these things that you see in DARCI, I was talking earlier about those round pegs and bang them into square holes. We did this time and time and time again and kept hitting our head against the wall in Mayfield. But I'm really proud to say that with the team that we had there, with all the agencies like the Red Cross that came in, they told us it was going to take 5 to 7 years for individual recovery, and we're going to do it in 3.5. Now, 3.5 years is still too long. It's still too long to be in a hotel or a camper. I know we're just coming off summer break, and I can tell you guys after a week in a hotel with my family, I'm kind of ready for a little separation. But if you can imagine being stuck in a hotel room after you've lost everything for months or years on end, or in a camper, it's very disheartening. So that's how it goes through that. I did want to show you that we do have a proof of concept that's active in West Kentucky right now. We're in 9 counties that are being implemented. We have over 40 nonprofit partners that have signed up into the system and are mapped and are showing here's what sort of assistance, and are starting to think about things in a different way. So we're incorporating the nonprofit partners that are already helping folks. We're incorporating the churches and everybody in between. And we also have hundreds of households in the system. We have over 300 households in the system. We haven't even done a citizen push yet in these communities. So people are starting to hear about it, and they're starting to sign up already. So our future strategy would be for full state implementation. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to take our implementation strategy, just as we've done and we're doing 9 times right now, divide the state into the 10 emergency management districts, continue to work with our partner, Disaster Readiness Center of Kentucky. A couple of months ago in July, you all heard from Miss Amy Shaquin. She came and talked about long-term recovery groups. She's actually affiliated with that center and is one that goes into these communities and helps establish long-term recovery groups. Our strategy right now is to go with 1 year of licensing and implementation costs covered by state foundations and funders that we've worked with multiple times through our own recovery, and we've already established a level of trust. Because to be honest with you, I can't wait. I can't see people continue to go through this, especially if you go by the phrase, if you know better, do better. And we've got a tool to be able to do that. And then what we'd like to request is that the additional 2 years of licensing costs be covered by the General Assembly. And that's priced at 20 cents per person, 20 cents per person in the Commonwealth. So when you start thinking about the time savings, when we go in from weeks to months to years to some individuals, the money savings, the $13 to $1 investment, bringing back local economies, getting people back into their jobs, getting people back into their homes, and the life saving, which is priceless. We feel like that is a very low cost and low point of entry for us to be able to do that, and not only do that here, but to lead the nation in something that is so important and that everyone is struggling with right now. So with that, I will take a breath. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time today to talk about that, and would certainly welcome any questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. We do have a few questions, and I'll go ahead and let our members ask the questions first. Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I have a question for each one of the presenters.
You go right ahead.
Thank you. I'll begin, since you went first, Mr. McGreevy, I'll begin with you. You spoke about the Red Cross's response to the tornadoes, understanding this is primarily focused on West Kentucky and DARCI and all that. But in 22, we had a very deadly flooding in East Kentucky that I spent weeks on the ground, boots on the ground at. Also in February of this year, we had more deadly flooding in Pike County. Do you have any information on Red Cross's, what you all did in these 2 particular incidents?
I don't have it at hand, but could definitely provide it for you. We always respond following a disaster. So in our response phase, which is not the department that I work with in the Red Cross, we have that information readily available and could definitely share it. I can speak to the 22 floods. We did have a long-term recovery program in the 2022 floods. It was a much smaller program than we had for the tornadoes just because of the amount of dollars raised. all of the long-term recovery program we're able to do is due to the generosity of our donors. So that guides much of our programming and our ability. But we did invest in several home repair programs, and we added additional staff for that disaster. That's the most recent disaster in Kentucky that we've had a long-term recovery program in, but we have certainly responded to the recent flooding in our response phase.
If you could get that information, I would appreciate
Most
it.
certainly.
Thank you. Mr. Drain, thank you for your presentation, your obvious passion for what you're doing. Long-term care recovery is definitely a must in these situations, as we have experienced across the state. I do have one question. Actually, it's a two-part question. So, does DARCI provide to those impacted? Does it provide a list of contractors/roofers? And if it does, how are you verifying that these are reputable contractors/roofers? Because what we see in these type of situations is, quite frankly, there's very cold and cruel people that will come in, try to take advantage of these people after they've already suffered by scamming them and so forth. So, two-part question for you, sir.
Yes, thank you, Representative Blanton. So I've seen it with my own eyes, and I know exactly what you're talking about, which is why we do not have a for-profit platform for those entities because of the risk of profiteering in disaster. We would, allow the local communities to go in and for those individuals and stuff to make those, their own assumptions. But you do bring up a good point. And there are states that have modeled price gouging, which extends not just from contractors and roofers, but, for example, the rents in Mayfield tripled after the tornado. And there's a lot of different things you can look at that other states like Colorado have done to help alleviate, I'm going to say eliminate completely, but to help alleviate some of those things that automatically go into place when a disaster is declared. But to answer your question, no, we do not supply that due to that risk that you had mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I see DARCI as something that can be beneficial across the state. I look forward to a statewide rollout of it. The realist to me says that we're going to see more of these. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And any tool we have to help our constituents and the citizens of this Commonwealth to more quickly and better recover from these situations, then it's a good thing. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Madam Co-Chair Webb.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that I was late, and you might have touched on this, I don't know, but Ryan, how is the Disaster Readiness Center covered financially? How did it start, I guess, and how is it sustaining?
Yeah, so they are a nonprofit organization, and initially through donors like the American Red Cross and other donors, they allowed them to get started and to start with the educational process through that. As far as sustainability models go, I do know that they are seeking grants, but one thing that allows us, where we are a public benefit corporation, I actually didn't mention that before, is that we can actually work in partnership with organizations like the Disaster Readiness Center and
DARCI you're talking about now.
with DARCI, yes.
And that Blue Sky is the company that owns DARCI?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. So,
And does Blue Sky have any other ventures other than DARCI at this time in this area?
not at this time. We do have some other plans, but not currently at
Are
this
we
time.
competing with any other entities throughout the United States that already have something like this in place? Was this modeled after anything?
As far as an end-to-end application, no. There are companies that do offer you saw like the disaster cycle, case management software or preparedness type things. But as far as a total end-to-end wraparound solution, we pride ourselves in being one of the first to do that.
And you referenced that I'm an appropriations and revenue geek here. I've been doing it a long time. You mentioned that you would need a General Assembly ask. If I was good at math, I'd been a doctor probably and not be sitting here. So how much would that ask be?
Yes.
Would it be incremental? Do you have those projections? And the sustainability of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for year one, like I said, we're going in and working with some of our nonprofit partners and foundations to cover the cost of the licensing and the implementation. But that would equate, to answer your question, Senator Webb, to approximately $900,000 a year. And what that would do is that would offer a license. We're really unique in what we do. When we license DARCI, we license it to the entire county. So not to an individual organization or to individual citizens. We want to ensure that everyone has equal opportunity and access to it. So it's open for every citizen, for every nonprofit organization within that county. If we were to do it in a statewide level, it'd be for every citizen, every nonprofit organization in the state.
And that cost estimate would be?
$900,000.
Oh, total?
Annually, yes, total.
The nonprofit partners, do they contribute? What's their relationship in that model if it moves forward?
Yeah.
As far as financial, one way or another, investing or getting from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the nonprofit partners that we're approaching for year one, what we're really looking to do is seek the longevity through the collaboration with the state and the General Assembly, because those nonprofit partners that we're working with right now are usually some of the first on the ground to deliver aid. And we want them to be able to refocus their time and energy and money. We have the Kentucky Colonels here who have been great stewards of doing that and shown time and time again that they can offer direct response and long-term assistance to that.
I just think there's a lot more questions, from the financial aspect. If there's a potential for implementation and need more information based on the model that's in existence from the financial standpoint. And another question I have that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart too is privacy. So if somebody's going to be a clearinghouse for sensitive personal data, what are the guardrails that y'all would have in protection of that individual's or entity's privacy?
It's a great question. As I said before, we model it after my chart, and our chief architect that helped design DARCI with us has actually worked with the CDC and electronic medical records, and we hold the same security as they do with EMR. And then also, though, once a profile is made and set up, the citizen actually has complete control at all times on who sees their individual information. And it's not an all or nothing thing. They can choose what documents, what photos that they want specific organizations to see, and they can limit that time that they can see it as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Senator Madden.
Thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. And when Director Gibson approached us that first week, I asked the question how many counties had the long term, and he advised there was only 13 at that time. And I don't think this program is important. I think it's imperative for our counties moving forward. And I said at that time we certainly didn't want to implement anything that was a non-funded mandate. And even Senator Herring came with a good suggestion of some type of incentive to get people in it. So I think it's very important. You sit here, everybody on this back rows, counties were really hit hard in 22 and 25. And we've always dealt with flooding, but it seems like lately we're still, they don't come easy anymore. They come full blast, and one of the problems I'm still seeing in my district is we're still dealing with 2022 flooding things that have not been resolved, not getting money. So when I hear that the president's talking about doing away with FEMA and possibly moving it to the state, I think that'd be the greatest thing that ever happened. Honestly, I mean, because we'd have more hands-on. We'd be able to get answers for people that are, I know people that's not been able to finish projects because local governments don't have the money to go out and advance all of that. So, moving forward, I hope that does happen, that the FEMA money comes to the states. But I'm glad that you do have a proposal. I guess my question would be on the 900,000. When you start implementing in the counties, I'm sure you all would go in with a team and try to help people set up. So, say the first year, I wouldn't think you'd be able to get 20, 30 counties on at a time if you do a good, thorough training and getting everybody. So are you going to need that full 900 right off the bat, or?
It's a great question. So what we're looking to do is take it and start it with a regional approach, and we do have a detailed implementation plan I could provide to you guys with that, to where we could do it at scale and do it quickly. But we do feel like the importance, even on just the citizen side, by allowing all the citizens of the Commonwealth to be able to upload the application to store information, to learn more about it, would be worthwhile. And that's something that we could do across the state from day one, as we're going through those communities and setting up the long-term recovery groups and doing the organization. But we feel very confident in our ability to do a rollout. We have a lot of different materials and stuff like that we've really honed in on, not just working in Kentucky, but also we have projects going in Florida and Hawaii as well.
Could I do a follow-up, Mr. Chairman? How many staff members do you have? Because when you start talking about 107 counties that don't have it, I think if you go in and if you don't hold their hand per se in some of these counties, some of them have real aggressive, real good emergency management teams. Some of them have lackluster. Some of them,
Yeah.
I'm just telling it like it is. I think if you don't hold those guys' hands and really get them set up, I think it could be a wasted on your part and our part of funding it. So
No, it's a great question. Currently, we do have a smaller staff just because we are working through the pilot project. We have about 5 people that are working through implementation. However, our ask from the funding sector, the nonprofits, and that for year one would be to fund positions, and not just the fund positions, but to actually bring those people back that were involved in long-term recovery, in other disasters, and bring them to the table, put them back into it so they can, you've got experienced people that are coming in and talking and working with communities, because it can be difficult. I think we've all seen that.
We heard from Mayfield and Graves County on their long-term, and it was a great presentation, and I've actually been on the ground down there in Old Maryland, and it was a lot of help to them and really advanced them a lot quicker. 3 years, I don't know if you, I know you have, but Mayfield it's come a long way in 3 years for what, damage that they had down there. And it was because of that long-term, I feel like that long-term recovery that was in place to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Chris. All right. We'll let you get out. Appreciate the presentation. Zoe Tribitz is here with us as well. And I look forward to hearing Zoe. She is an emergency wildland firefighter. Let her get comfortable. Could you not find a more dangerous job? Wrestling grizzly bears wasn't open. But thank you for what you do. And thank you for being here today.
Let's see. Is that working?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Well, thank you and Representative Hart for inviting me here today. Good morning to our co-chairs Webb and Freeland and members of the task force. My name is Zoe Tribitz, and I am a wildland firefighter. When most people in Kentucky hear wildfire, they don't think of our hills, mountains, and forests. They're picturing the towering infernos out west that splash across the headlines, or the flames that devour entire landscapes on their TV screens. But the reality is, Kentucky faces wildfire threats, and they're growing. Our communities are not immune. I'm here today not only to raise awareness, but to call for urgent action. Because the truth is, we can do more to respond properly to wildfires here at home and better prepare for the emergencies that lie ahead. I am a nationally qualified wildland firefighter with experience on the front line in multiple states. Until last week, I served with the Kentucky Division of Forestry, the agency responsible for combating wildfires on state and private lands across the Commonwealth. Before that, I fought wildfires in Washington state, where I gained valuable insight into how different regions approach wildfire management. During that time, I also engaged with firefighters from other states, having informal discussions, asking questions, and learning more about how their communities handle prevention, response, and recovery. Wildfires have become more prominent in the public consciousness as we've seen major destructive burns that have impacted families, created dangerous air pollution, and destroyed millions of dollars in resources and property. What people often don't realize is that Kentucky experiences every year hundreds of wildfires that burn tens of thousands of acres and require a dedicated firefighting response. The Kentucky Division of Forestry is organized into regional branches that manage land across the state. I was based in Hazard Branch, which has the highest wildfire occurrence in Kentucky. Although we only cover 7 counties, we routinely respond to over 400 fires a year. Eastern Kentucky experiences the most frequent wildfires due to a combination of factors, including fuel loading, steep topography, and weather conditions, creating a greater demand for boots on the hill. Traditionally in Kentucky, we recognize 2 fire seasons, which is where conditions align for consistent heightened fire activity. Our fall fire season is October 1st through December 15th, and in the spring we have another fire season from February 15th through April 30th. During these times, the Division of Forestry, particularly in its busier eastern branches, will employ a mix of full-time, seasonal, and emergency wildland firefighters. The latter was my title. Basic wildfire response techniques have been around for decades. Unlike structure fires, where firefighters typically have easy access to fire hydrants and water, wildfires, particularly in mountainous terrain, usually occur outside of the reach of water sources or vehicle access, which makes them harder to attack. So with our conditions in the mountains, this is how we would contain a wildfire. Our crews will hike in alongside the fire, often chasing it uphill, building fire lines, which is clear breaks in fuels that the fire needs to spread. Fuels for the fire would include timber, leaves, dry grass, and any other organic material. We use a mix of tools to create these lines: chainsaws, leaf blowers, and bulldozers where we can get them access, along with hand tools like shovels, hoes, rakes, axes, and specialized wildfire equipment. We'll remove everything flammable: leaf litter, brush, down trees, to create a total break in fuel. That means when the fire hits that line, it has nothing left to burn, and it'll stop moving. We'll work hard to build fire line all the way around the fire, often using features like cliffs, creeks, or old roads to anchor us. Sometimes we'll extend these lines with backburns, which are controlled fires that we set inside of our line. It will burn any fuel between where we are and where the fire is, and when the fire hits it, it'll help slow or stop the fire's progression. The size and placement of these lines depends on the fuel, the wind, the slope. We'll watch for embers that could blow across our lines, rolling logs, or dangerous dead trees that could fall and potentially carry the fire back over our line. Even after the fire is contained, our job isn't done. That's when we begin the sort of dirty work of mop-up. We'll dig through the dirt, breaking apart smoldering stumps, brush, and making sure every hot spot is out, literally with our hands in the dirt, trailing around the fire line to ensure that no heat is left. Without this careful work, in the right conditions, the fire could start up again and escape when we're not there. As you can see, this process requires extreme manual labor and can take days or even weeks and requires a large, dedicated team working together. During fire season and increasingly outside of the traditional seasonal windows, Kentucky's wildland firefighters answer the call for these marathons of response. We often work 12, 14, 16 or more hour shifts for days or weeks at a time, leaving behind our lives and our families. We do this in dangerous conditions, dodging falling trees weakened by fire, working near cliff lines and coal mining breaks, and managing rapidly shifting flame fronts. A few years ago, a young firefighter in our branch suffered serious burns during a fire. Situations change quickly and danger is constant. Our gear doesn't include masks or respirators like structure firefighters you might see on a structure firefighter. We breathe smoke for hours as we work. Recent studies, including those following firefighters who worked in the LA fires in the winter, are starting to link these exposure levels to elevated health risks, including breathing issues and cancer. Beyond the danger, the physical toll is immense. Carrying gear uphill, suffering muscle strains, lacerations, impact injuries, and chronic fatigue from long hours and little rest. Or injuries that don't jump off the page, like the painful heel blisters I spent weeks dealing with, trying to fight off infection and dealing with pain in every step. Despite the danger we face and the expertise the job demands, wildland firefighters across the country have long struggled for recognition. Our work has too often been dismissed as unskilled labor, a label that has justified low pay, limited benefits, and few opportunities for advancement. But let me be clear, this work is anything but unskilled. Our jobs require us to be part meteorologist, part topographer, part biologist, constantly reading the land, the weather, the fuel to predict how a fire will move. We make real-time risk assessments in life-threatening conditions to guide strategy and to keep our crews safe. These are not skills you can pick up overnight. They come through rigorous training and on-the-ground boots experience. We use specialized tools and tactics in dangerous and remote terrain, making the split-second decisions that protect lives, homes, and natural resources. We're firefighters, scientists, strategists, and first responders all at once. Calling this unskilled isn't just wrong, it's dangerous, because when skilled, experienced firefighters are undervalued, they leave. And when they leave, the communities we protect are left more vulnerable. Earlier this year, my crew was working along a mountain ridge on a windy day, which maybe surprisingly is one of the most dangerous conditions a wildland firefighter can face, as wind can change fire behavior unpredictably and dramatically. We were preparing to cut a new section of fire line when suddenly and urgently, my crew leader, an individual with decades of experience, suddenly told us to retreat back the way we came. Within 30 seconds, the spot we had been standing was swallowed by the fire. Maybe somebody else would have caught the warning signs. But his instincts, sharpened by decades on the line, saved us from a dangerous spot. That kind of institutional knowledge, the ability to read subtle shifts in the wind, terrain, and fire behavior, is what keeps crews and communities safe. It's not something you can teach in a classroom. It's earned over years of experience, and it's invaluable on the fire line. That's why investing in experienced, highly trained wildland firefighters isn't just important. It's critical for public safety and disaster preparedness. In the past few years, wildfire behavior has grown more intense, driven by the same weather patterns we see fueling other disasters across Kentucky. In the fall of 2023, the situation became so severe we had to call in out-of-state support just to keep up. The need for a stable, skilled, and fully staffed firefighting force in Kentucky has never been more urgent. The safety of our communities depend on it. That's why I'm here today. In Kentucky's most fire-prone areas, high turnover and chronic understaffing are putting both firefighters and communities at risk. But this is a problem we can solve. With the right investment in our state's wildland firefighters, we have a real opportunity to strengthen wildfire response and improve disaster preparedness across the Commonwealth. We do this work because we believe in it. We love it. We hike into the smoke, dig fire line through the hills, and work long, exhausting shifts, not for the paycheck, but because we deeply care about our communities, our forests, and the people we work alongside. This job is a calling. It's hard, dangerous, and demanding, but it's also meaningful, and we're proud to do it. But every year, emergency firefighters are forced to leave the work they love. Not because they want to, but because they simply cannot afford to stay. Let me be clear. Emergency firefighters are not just support staff. We are the majority of boots on the ground protecting Kentucky from wildfires. In the hazard branch, when fully staffed, there would be 15 full-time employees, 20 seasonal firefighters, and 63 emergency firefighters. That means the people doing most of the on-the-ground, high-risk fire response are the ones being treated as temporary and replaceable. Even the title, emergency, is misleading. It sounds like we're only called in for the rare, urgent event. The truth is, we're there on every high fire danger day, every fire large and small, working just as hard, often harder than anybody else. Yet, we receive no health insurance, no paid sick leave, no vacation time, no retirement. And for our work, we make just $12.60 an hour. That was actually only recently raised from the flat $12 an hour we had been making all of last year and for a number of years before. And while that 60-cent raise was appreciated, it also felt like a slap in the face. Because when you're risking your life, putting your body on the line, and missing time with your family to serve your community, 60 cents doesn't reflect your worth. It doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't show respect. This low and unpredictable pay forces good firefighters to walk away. I've watched coworkers skip meals during long shifts just to make sure their kids could eat at home. I've seen dedicated, skilled firefighters torn between a job they love and the families that they're trying to support. These are not just jobs, this is service. Emergency firefighters don't show up for the money, they show up for the mission. But if we want them to stay, if we want to keep these experienced, passionate public servants in the ranks, we have to give them a reason to stay. That means fair pay and basic benefits. That means recognition of the skill, commitment, and sacrifice that it takes to do this work. It's time to stop treating wildland firefighters as expendable. It's time to invest in the people who are investing everything they have in protecting this state. When I speak to Kentuckians, they're shocked to hear how little we're paid. It's not that people don't want to invest in our first responders. They just don't know. And that's not just a Kentucky problem. Wildland firefighters across the country have been fighting for recognition and fair compensation for years, and only recently have those efforts started to gain some ground at the federal level. Earlier this year, Congress passed the Wildland Firefighter Paycheck Protection Act with broad bipartisan support. This legislation finally acknowledged the dangerous and essential nature of wildland firefighting and took real steps to improve pay and retention for federal crews. Now, entry-level wildland firefighters will earn $20.93 an hour working for the federal government in base pay, a significant step up from what many of us in Kentucky currently make. In addition, they've introduced a new benefit called Incident Response Premium Pay, which increases compensation dramatically during extended wildfire operations. Once a federal firefighter has been assigned to a fire for more than 36 hours, they begin earning 4.5 times their base pay for the remainder of that deployment. That means during the long and dangerous campaigns, the kind that are demanding most from our firefighters, they're finally being paid something closer to what their work is worth. In August, I traveled with a 20-person Kentucky wildfire crew to help respond to fires in Louisiana. Because Kentucky's peak fire season doesn't overlap with those in other parts of the country, we're able to send crews to support other times in their time of need. And that does not compromise any of our own readiness at home. These out-of-state assignments not only provide critical help to partner agencies during major fire events, but they also generate revenue for Kentucky as our resources and firefighters are paid through interagency agreements. It's a win-win. We gain valuable experience and represent our state proudly, and we can bring in funding that supports our own fire program. I was really proud to be part of that crew, but I also saw the sacrifice that it required. 2 of the firefighters on that crew had newborn babies at home, less than a month old when we left. And yet they still made the difficult decision to leave their families and join this deployment. They didn't go because they wanted to be away during such an important time. They went because they needed the money. Technically, we were representing Kentucky, but only full-time and seasonal employees were on the state's payroll. Emergency firefighters were hired as temporary federal employees. That meant we forfeited getting any overtime pay on this trip, just to receive the federal base pay, which for us is still nearly $3 an hour higher than Kentucky's overtime rate would have been for us. That's the reality many of us face when the only opportunity to make a living wage is to leave the state or tank on the most grueling assignments. It puts enormous pressure on firefighters and their families. These are public servants who should be supported, not put in an impossible position. Meanwhile, our neighboring states have stepped up. Many have increased pay and opportunity for their firefighters in recent years. This investment has put Kentucky's support for its first responders at the bottom of the list compared to many partner agencies. In the last state budget session, while most state employees received raises, emergency firefighters were left out. Again, this ongoing neglect has caused our pay to fall further and further behind. In the packets that I've handed out on that, if you flip up that first page, it includes a table where I list some of these comparative costs of what entry-level firefighters are making per hour. Kentucky, $12.60, Tennessee, $15 an hour, North Carolina, $15.60, and Virginia, $20.60. I've also included some other states with similar or lower costs of living, but also pay their firefighters significantly more, including Michigan, $18 an hour, Montana, $19.05, New Mexico, $19.24, and North Dakota, $21.53. Based on these comparisons and my own experience, I strongly recommend that the Kentucky legislature sets a base pay of $17 an hour for emergency firefighters in the upcoming budget session. It's a meaningful increase from where we are now, but a necessary investment in public safety and the future of disaster response in Kentucky. That August trip I mentioned to Louisiana really highlighted challenges that our firefighters are facing, the ones that lead to high turnover and loss of crucial experience. But I think it also illustrates the tremendous opportunity before us. Our crew didn't just complete assignments. Fire leadership often was asking us to follow up other crews and bring their work up to the standard that Kentucky had been setting. It was hard work, but a proud moment. Word is spreading regionally and nationally. If you want a crew that shows up and gets the job done right, call the Kentucky crew. Our state's firefighting force is ready to answer the call. We are underutilized and overlooked, but with the proper investment, we could be a major force in addressing growing disaster threats that Kentucky faces. Wildland firefighters are qualified to respond to all types of emergencies. There were wildland firefighters at Ground Zero after 9/11 and leading recovery efforts after Hurricane Katrina. Every year, crews like ours are deployed nationwide for floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. Kentucky has faced 4 federally declared disasters this year alone. Yet, after recent major flooding in eastern Kentucky, volunteers did most of the recovery work while our firefighters were never called in. That's a missed opportunity. We already have a precedent for interagency support. Many full-time wildland firefighters from western Kentucky did do some assistance during tornado cleanup, bringing their chainsaw skills to the table. With a better staffed and better trained workforce, Kentucky could be leveraging its firefighting force's manpower for disaster response and recovery on a much larger scale. Beyond emergency response, wildland firefighters could also help with important resiliency building projects like fuel reductions, hazard mitigation, trail and road maintenance, resource restoration, and community outreach. Many states already use their fire crews during off-incident periods for these valuable efforts. It makes sense for Kentucky to do the same, to build stronger, safer communities while providing steady work for our firefighters. Increasing investment in training and retaining firefighters won't just improve public safety at home. It could also boost revenue by enabling more of these Kentucky crews to take out-of-state deployments. These deployments require highly certified leadership, which we currently lack due to limited training and high turnover. Investing in our workforce now will pay off in stronger, more skilled crews who can earn revenue while protecting Kentuckians. This kind of investment will allow wildland firefighters to build real careers here in Kentucky, particularly for young people in eastern Kentucky where we need them most. It will lead to faster, more effective wildfire response and open new opportunities for our state's firefighting force to be a key player in disaster preparedness and recovery. I want to close by thanking you all for your time here today and to urge this task force and the legislature as a whole to invest in our public safety and disaster response by investing in our state's wildland firefighters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe. It really educated me on a lot of this, and I appreciate you taking time to present to us this morning. And one question I did have was, how many wildland firefighters do we have in Kentucky right now? Do you know?
That is a good question. I cannot give you an exact number. Again, I'm a boots on the ground kind of guy, so I don't have the whole picture. I will tell you that, for example, as I said, in Hazard Branch, if we were fully staffed, we would have 15 full-time, 20 seasonal, and 63 emergencies.
Okay.
But I can tell you that we are rarely at full staffing, and I can also tell you we are one of the largest branches in the state. Many other branches have far fewer numbers than us, particularly in western Kentucky where there's a lot less fire response need. But I do not have an exact number for you, and I apologize.
All right. No, that's okay. And we do have a couple of questions. Representative Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation today. Couple questions, clarification. We're talking about, you talked about full-time, you're talking about seasonal, and then emergency.
Sure.
So full-time, I'm assuming, is under the Division of Forestry. Seasonal and emergency really they're not full-time employees. But they do work under the Division of Forestry when called upon. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's correct. Just to, explain this a little further, perhaps. So yeah, your full-time employees are working year-round. They're given full benefits. They're salaried employees with the state. Our seasonal firefighters in eastern Kentucky make up our crew leadership. So they'll typically be crew leaders and dozer operators for us. And they work full-time when we're in those fire season windows. So from those during the fall fire season, they'll be working a normal 40-hour week on top of whatever our fire response is. And the difference between emergencies and seasonals is that emergencies have no guaranteed hours. So we are only called in for days where there is a red flag warning, when there's a high potential for fire, or if there is a fire, that's when we'll get called in. So that's sort of the difference between the three levels there.
Do your typical seasonal and emergency firefighters, do they typically have other employment during the times they're not working for forestry?
Yeah, so it varies, I would say. Typically, they will do some type of work. It can be challenging for us, especially now, because while technically we have those seasonal windows, we respond to fires almost every month out of the year, especially in the winter. The summer tends to be a little bit wetter, obviously, so a little bit less then, but so it can be really challenging for us to get employment outside of those times, because you never know when a call might come in, and people want to be available to support their crew during those times. So oftentimes people will have employment like cutting grass or something they can sort of pick up and put down rather than an actual job anywhere else. But to be honest with you, I had a young man on my crew who, when he heard his baby was coming, he tried to balance both a night shift at Wendy's in order to pay the bills on top of then showing up for fires when he got called in. So people will do a lot to try to make it work and keep this job, but it can be very challenging to sort of maintain a second employment with the type of work that we do.
No, I totally understand. I'm
Yeah.
from the East. I've seen the action of these individuals. I can show you some places where I guarantee you, if you're in just a few weeks, they'll be on fire.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
It's every year, same locations. I do have one more very quick question.
You go right ahead.
For them. Are you a fan of the series Fire Country?
You know, that's a good question. I think I'm going to abstain on responding to that at
All
this
right.
time.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Madam Co-Chair Webb.
Thank you, and I appreciate the presentation. I think it's worthy to note that disasters include fires,
Yes.
and certainly there are prevention, mitigation, resilience things that can be done from a forestry management standpoint. Historically, forestry is grossly underfunded, and sometimes the first thing to be cut in budget cycles, in my experience here. It's troubling for me. I've got a reclamation degree. I'm kind of close to the soil
Yeah.
and what grows out of it. So I think the awareness for this committee and beyond is important. And I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you being here because forests overall are beneficial to our bottom line in every aspect of hunting and bourbon and all those things, plus the hardwood and the wood that we ship out for other things. So thanks for the little jolt of awareness here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got more of a comment than a question. You know, most of the communities in Kentucky, they traditionally rely on their local fire departments for this type of fire service. You know, a couple years ago, we recognized the need with the urban search and rescue team that we just built that, you know, all firefighters across the state, whether you're paid, career, volunteer, what have you, they receive the same training through the Fire Commission. The Forestry Department provides the same training, both the paid and volunteer departments, for wildfire conditions. But what is interesting, and we've kind of touched on it today, and I'm really glad that Zoe was able to come and present to us, with the needs of our state and the surrounding states. Unlike urban search and rescue, we already have a wildfire team, so to speak. But what we need to do as a legislature and as a state is to maybe look at that and compare what we have to what we're doing with the urban search and rescue team. We created an urban search and rescue team, one, so that we as a state can be self-sufficient. We can rely on our resources and our people when we have an emergency instead of relying on our neighboring states. Well, in the wildland firefighting situation, we have our teams and we're responding. But if we would build, if we would provide the resources to better train and better equipped and build our wildfire team similar to what we've done with the USAR team, to where we're utilizing our different volunteers and career members around the state that are willing to come in on the weekend and take the extra training. Firefighting, most departments in the state of Kentucky with your volunteers and your paid, they concentrate on structural firefighting because that's what they see all the time. They don't really, although we train for wildfires, it's just like a chapter in the book or a section that we train on. And we don't have the ability to really hone in our skills on wildfire firefighting like we should. And we've learned that through search and rescue, through the multiple deployments that we've had, not only in our state, but with some of our career and volunteer resources going out of the state to respond over the years. We've learned that the particular skill set that it takes for the USAR teams and wildfire, in this case, wildland firefighting, it's a very specialized skill set. Although you get some familiarity and you know how, as a firefighter, to go in and assist a wildfire crew, learning the topography, learning how to read the weather. And I mean, she mentioned you have to be a meteorologist. You really do, because a wildland firefight, a forest fire creates its own climate. I mean, you've probably seen pictures of the little fire tornadoes and stuff. That's all based on actual meteorology evidence and data. So you really there is a very specialized skill set. And I would just urge not only our task force, but us as a legislator, maybe we need to start looking at creating a team like we have for USAR for wildland firefighting. We already have the team. We just have to build on it. We as a legislator would need to, and as a state would need to provide the additional resources and equipment and the ability for them to grow that team, but to provide that specialized skill set. I think there's enough volunteers and enough firefighters out there that want to learn this and would be interested in being a part of this. I think we could do it. We just need to maybe take a different approach in how we look at it and assess it. And she really hit the nail on the head. It's not an unskilled labor thing. They are a very specialized skill set, and I'm telling you from experience, because I've been on some of these forest fires in our state, and I really appreciate your presentation. I read through your documents. You've really hit the nail on the head, and if we could take that back to our fellow legislators, maybe as we move forward, we can create something maybe similar to our USAR team for wildland firefighting.
Yeah, and I just would like to add that we have really great personnel and people in place already, but it was Representative Hart and some of the work that the legislature did putting together that USAR team that really inspired me to want to speak, because you have the right people in place already. What an investment in that could then turn out to allow people to really do their jobs effectively. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you. And Representative Whitaker?
Yeah, just one brief question. You mentioned that wildland firefighters don't use, here in Kentucky, we don't use respirators. Why is that?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's a question that's sort of being asked at a national scale right now. Part of the reason we don't wear the sort of full gear you imagine when you think of a firefighter, when you see a city firefighter running into a structure, is we're doing a very different type of work. That gear that structure firefighters wear, having not been a structure firefighter, I don't think I could wear it very long. That it's 80, 90 pounds that they're wearing at a time. And they're often working, I say that structure firefighting tends to be more of a sprint, where wildland firefighting is more of a marathon. So for us, wearing, big heavy gear like that would impede in a lot of our abilities. In terms of sort of lighter level masking and stuff in the smoke, I wish I had a great answer for you. Like I said, for a long time, it just wasn't standard. It's only recently that we're starting to really see some of the long-term health implications. And that question is sort of being looked at a national level of maybe when and where should we be implementing some of that. But it's just not our standard as of today for wildfire.
Well, thank you so much, Zoe, and I appreciate what you do, and thank you, and please be careful.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we've got one more presenter, Rebecca Shelton, the Director of Policy for the Appalachian Citizens Law Center. And any members that came in after roll call that want to mark their attendance? All right, Representative Lafferty. I'll mark you down. Okay. All right, we'll get you down. All right.
Well, good morning. I'm assuming I need to be done in 10 minutes, so
Yeah,
I'm going to try to
I apologize,
cut
so-
my presentation a bit, so I apologize for the speed that I go through it.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for inviting me here today, to the co-chairs of the committee. My name is Rebecca Shelton. I'm the Director of Policy at Appalachian Citizens Law Center. We're based in Whitesburg, Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, we're a public interest law firm and policy organization there, and like so many others, were affected by the 2022 floods. And since that time, we've just been trying to find ways to funnel our energy and capacity into community resilience and recovery. So I'm going to speak a little bit about some of those avenues today, and especially including one of the things that we did after the floods is we are a policy organization, so we started thinking about policy, particularly on the federal level. We did release a federal level policy platform over a year ago in May 2024, endorsed by nearly 40 organizations across several Appalachian states. We've been working on that policy ever since, and I'm going to try to talk about today some of the issues within that platform, but focused on state level action. So sort of the big 4 issue areas that we've covered in that platform are investing in state and local capacity to respond and recover, relieving the recovery burden for low-income households, improving flood data and mapping, and investing in nature-based hazard mitigation. So first, very quickly, you talked about stream gauges a little bit at a prior disaster meeting. I'm going to talk about stream gauges, the need for more stream gauges and flood inundation maps. So if you're not familiar with stream gauges, they can have a variety of capacities, but one of the things that they can do is they can send flood alerts to nearby residents. So stream gauges, they can be continuously monitoring the height of river and stream conditions and can send real-time data to residents nearby that the river is rising. They also are able to provide data on stream flow conditions in the long term to help build flood models and improve forecasting for an area. So here is an image of the stream gauge, USGS stream gauge, that's actually right beside our office on the North Fork of the Kentucky River in Whitesburg. And then the other image is of the sort of public interface, the user interface for that gauge on NOAA's website. In the gray area, you can see that's the historical, the recent historical data that the gauge is collecting in terms of the river height there. And then also it is you see the white background area, the official forecast area. So what these gauges can do is when there is a precipitation forecast for the area, they can also create a gauge height forecast. So you can see that this could be very valuable when there is, you can actually predict flood events before they happen, and best case scenario if you have good precipitation data. So flood inundation maps build on the capability of stream gauges. They model the area that will flood in correspondence with a specific height on a stream gauge. So to build one of these maps, you need a gauge and you need a model that's calibrated to the gauge. The maps then can assist in emergency operations and planning. And again, best case scenario, you have some kind of a forecast for the area that can also assist in protecting public infrastructure, areas, assets of the community, and evacuations where needed. So the images on this slide are of it's a USGS flood inundation mapper, publicly accessible interface. This is the flood inundation map for Hazard, Kentucky. You can see on the one side of the screen is there's a colorful toggle there. If the gauge height is at 14 feet, you can see the blue line there. That's the river running through town. That's what it's not a flood condition. The river's within its banks. You toggle that up to 28 feet. And you can see the areas of the community that are going to be affected and going to be flooded. And so it helps a lot with planning. So here's a map, apologies for the colors, they're not the best, where these are USGS stream gauges and flood inundation maps in the state. Doesn't account for privately funded gauges or others. But you can see the blue circles are sort of indicate the number of gauges in a given county. And I also have the numbers there on each of the counties. And the black triangles are the flood inundation maps in the state. You can see pretty immediately that we don't have a lot of them. Most counties in the state, or there's a large amount of counties that don't have any stream gauges. Those that do have stream gauges, the majority have between 1 to 2 gauges. There is, of course, a concentration of gauges in the more urban areas of the state in Lexington and Louisville, and we have very few flood inundation maps. There are just 8. So one of the reasons for this, it's pretty predictable, is they are expensive. USGS stream gauges can cost anywhere between $11,000 to $30,000 plus to install, depending on what kind of capabilities those gauges have. plus annual maintenance. The flood inundation maps can cost over $200,000. A lot of times USGS does try to provide some funding for the gauges and maps. You know, I think in an ideal world, they'd like to be able to provide 50% coverage for each of those. But communities still have to provide match funding, cooperative funding. You can see here's an image of the stream gauges. We helped the community of Jenkins install 4 stream gauges after the 2022 floods. USGS was able to cover 50%, and then the Kentucky Department of Local Government's Flood Control Local Match Program provided the other 50%. We have also been trying to work with Neon in Letcher County to do some gauge installations there, but the same funding model hasn't worked because USGS was only able to provide 20% of the costs. So the Department of Local Government would only have provided 20% of the costs, which still left 60% of the cost for Neon to cover, which is an impossibility. So we've been trying to work on that project for about 2 years, but haven't had the funding to get it done. So one recommendation I wanted to put forward to you all to consider, and I'm glad the Kentucky Climate Center presented earlier today, is the creation of a university-based flood center that could receive annual appropriations from the legislature to deploy and maintain stream gauges, create these maps, and conduct research on flooding. So this would be modeled after the Iowa Flood Center. It was established in 2009 with an initial appropriation from the state legislature at the time, which was $1.3 million. That's now, in today's dollars, roughly $2 million. And to date, they have deployed over 300 gauges across their state, created over 30 flood inundation maps, and they have a public user face and interface that's been accessed over 5 million times by the public to accessing this data. And I think you'd find a lot of enthusiasm from researchers in the state. And Kentucky, there's already projects ongoing actually in Letcher County, where there are some Kentucky State researchers putting out gauges, studying flash flooding and headwater streams. And they'd like to be able to keep those out there for the long term, but they don't have the funding to do so. So the next topic, household recovery and hazard mitigation capacity. Switching gears here, one of the other issues on our, on our radar is the inaccessibility of flood insurance and how lack of flood insurance really hampers the ability of households to recover from floods. Flood insurance is expensive. Premiums are over $1,200 plus on average in Kentucky. It essentially doubles the insurance that you have on your home to have flood insurance. Consequently, there's only over 18,000 people in the state that have flood insurance. In the 2022 floods, only 5% of households had flood insurance. Currently in Letcher County, unfortunately, that number hasn't changed a whole lot. 3% of all residential properties in the county have flood insurance, and just 14% that are in the special flood hazard area have flood insurance. That's additionally even more problematic because if a household, we know a lot of households received FEMA aid after the 2022 floods. If they receive FEMA aid for their property, they are required to maintain flood insurance. Otherwise, they won't receive aid from FEMA in the future. And that requirement is attached to the property, not the property owner. So if the property is sold, it's still attached to the property. It's not the person or the family that was affected by the flood that has that kind of requirement. So just to put some numbers on this, in Letcher County, the number of residences that received FEMA repair or replacement aid in 2022 was over 1,400 households. The number of residences that currently have a policy through the National Flood Insurance Program, around 350. So assuming that all 350 of those residences have insurance were impacted by the floodwaters, that still leaves over 1,000 residences that won't get aid from FEMA in the next flood, nor will they have flood insurance, so they'll be left with very little. One way to try to get at this problem of really high insurance premiums is to get communities to participate in or help them participate in the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system. The community rating system is a program that's set up through the National Flood Insurance Program that tries to encourage local governments to implement floodplain management practices that exceed the minimum standards that a community is required to maintain in order to be eligible for the National Flood Insurance Program. Communities, essentially by investing in these floodplain management strategies, they accrue points, which can help their residents then receive discounts on insurance premiums ranging from 5 to 45%. So, unfortunately, in Kentucky, there are only 43 CRS participating communities, so we can certainly do better. And more than half of those have a discount on their flood insurance, which is 5% or less. So there's big room for improvement. One of the real challenges is the incentive structure is a little disjointed. You know, we are trying to get local governments to set aside the capacity and their resources to invest in additional floodplain management standards, but then the financial benefits actually accrue at the household level. So the incentive structure is just a little bit, it's not super streamlined. So our recommendation here is to create actually a state-based mitigation fund that would support local government's participation in the CRS program so that we have both improved floodplain management and decrease the national flood insurance premiums for households. The other recommendation we have related to this piece, I mentioned it just very briefly, but I think we can improve Kentucky's property disclosures so that we actually require sellers to disclose whether the property has ever received federal disaster aid. Current law only requires that they disclose if the property's had a flooding problem before and the flood zone, but not whether there's an attachment to that property requiring them to have flood insurance in order to receive FEMA aid in the future. And last, I'm going to talk about some landscape level kind of nature-based hazard mitigation strategies that are really regionally important to our area. The Letcher County Long-Term Recovery Plan was just recently released, and there's quite a few sections that reference the history of our economy in the area, saying that deforestation and coal mining, it's a part of our past and a part of our present. But it has significantly impacted the environment. And there's a quote here from the recovery plan that just references, logging activities and coal mining operations have altered the landscape and created conditions that increase the risk of flooding. I'm going to skip this slide to just go a little quickly here. When it comes to logging, one of the big risks that we have are landslides after these really heavy precipitation events. After the July 22 floods, the Kentucky Geological Survey identified 1,000 landslides and debris flows associated with the event. There are studies that show that landslides occur 3 to 9 times more often in logged versus non-logged areas, often years after the logging has taken place, and the roots that hold the soil in place and the stumps have decayed. Then there's no longer that structure to hold the land. And it can occur at 24-hour rainfall events for 4-year intervals, 4-year recurrence intervals. So it doesn't take super heavy precipitation to sort of destabilize some of these steep slope areas after they've been logged. Kentucky does not have best management practices right now for logging steep slopes to reduce landslides and sediment flows. So our recommendation here is to direct the Division of Forestry and the Forestry Best Management Practices Board to establish logging BMPs for steep slopes to help prevent these landslides in the future. The BMP document in Kentucky, BMPs are required in Kentucky. They do already, the document states that some slopes may be too steep to log. It recognizes the importance of retaining trees and classes of sensitive areas, but it doesn't go into a lot of detail there or provide specific definitions. I provided for the committee a technical document that was authored by the previous director of the Kentucky Geological Survey, William Hanneberg. He has put together this document for us following the floods with detailed recommendations on BMPs to reduce landslides. And last, there is a lot of potential to help improve the hydrologic function of previously mined lands. I know there's a lot of folks on here from Eastern Kentucky. I don't need to go into detail on this. Mine land reclamation involves a lot of heavy compaction often to keep slopes from sliding, to stabilize those areas after mining. But oftentimes the soil is thin, it's finer grained, there's a lot of rock underneath. And so it just doesn't have as much ability to hold and absorb water as some of the nearby forests or the conditions that were there prior to mining. So that there is good news in that reforesting these mine sites now after they've been reclaimed can reduce compaction and create conditions that are more similar to what was there prior to mining. And there's already folks in the state doing a lot of great work on this. This is just an image here from Green Forest Works. It's a nonprofit organization already based in the state that's reforested thousands of acres of previously mined land. Just an image here to show, how remarkable the changes can be even after just a decade. This is a site in Breathitt County that they reforested. You can see it prior to that effort and then again in 2019. There is a federal-led initiative, the Appalachian Regional Reforestation Initiative, that's been around for a couple of decades. It's brought together some of the staff at the Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement with university partners, state agencies, and nonprofits trying to reforest these previously mined lands throughout Appalachia. In Kentucky, that partnership has been successful in reforesting over 50,000 acres of previously mined land, but they have also documented the reforestation potential of these previously mined lands in the state, which is there are hundreds of thousands of acres that could still benefit from some of this. And not all mine sites would be previously mined lands would be appropriate. There's a lot of different uses for these sites, but this is one of them. So we recommend to support these reforestation efforts on these mine lands and to create a state fund to do so. There have never been any dedicated federal funds for reforesting mine lands, even though there has been the federal initiative, the ARI initiative. ARI partners with state, in cooperation with state and federal agencies and corporations and nonprofits, have sort of patchworked together funding. But we think that a dedicated and reliable funding source could really help propel this work forward. And that I'll close it out. Thank you all so much for your time. I'm happy to answer questions now, but I also know we're short on time, so would also be really happy to talk with any of you at a future time. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We do have a few questions. Madam Co-Chair Webb.
I appreciate going first. I'm going to have to step out on a Zoom call. But I appreciate the work that y'all do down there. In one of our first meetings, we did have a discussion. I think Eric mentioned our stream gauges and all that and how we are looking at that and making some progress actually on existing. So that's something I think that we're already working on, and we appreciate that. As far as the insurance component will be on the agenda here in a future meeting, so you might want to tune into that. Feel free to do that because it's a problem, and the presentations will scare you to death. Yes. And of course, as I stated earlier, I'm all about reforestation, former coal miner, but certainly there has been great strides. UK does a great job with that. I do think that's an important part of mitigation in Eastern Kentucky. So appreciate your recommendations and what you do. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to step out again.
Thank you.
All right. And Representative Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very, not very, but I'm pretty familiar with the federal flood insurance program and the Bigger Water Act and all the changes that's happened over the last several years. But you said something that I wasn't aware of, and I thought maybe clarified to make sure I understood it right. If a property received like FEMA aid from a flood in the past, they cannot receive, if that house changes hands or ownership and there's another flood 10, 12 years down the road, if they don't have flood insurance, they cannot, or they're not qualified to get FEMA aid again. Is that correct?
Yes. I don't know how that is enforced, to be honest. I don't know what the sort of enforcement ability is with that, looking that far back. But that's in the regulations.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that because, one of the problems with the federal flood insurance and the reason why a lot of people I'm sure you're aware of it. Maybe the committee members aren't. But when the Bigger Water Act was passed on the federal level, it changed the way they set the rates. And to give you an example, I have flood insurance on my home, and my home has been flooded in '97.
Yeah.
But if my house was, for the lack of a better term, grandfathered in because I pay about $1,500 a year for flood insurance. If I was to sell my house to somebody today and they were required to get, and they would be required to get flood insurance because you can't get a mortgage without it.
Right.
That same insurance that I'm paying $1,500 a year for would cost about $3,600.
Yeah.
And that's why it's been so devastating, because one, people can't afford it, but two, if I sell the house, even though I've had a policy on it for over 20 years, my policy don't follow the house.
Right.
So, it's almost like FEMA's contradicting themselves with that. They're not going to let that insurance policy that's been there for 20 years follow the property, but they're going to penalize that property if you ever receive federal aid. And I just wanted some clarification, because that's something new that I didn't know about. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a couple of years ago, rates went up again for folks on flood insurance because they changed the risk rating of properties in different flood zones. And it is, in Letcher County, the majority of folks who receive FEMA aid or applied for FEMA are households that are less than $30,000 a year households. And so it just highlights the affordability challenge. It's really, it's a real puzzler. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Representative Hart. Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation. I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate you talking about how you're trying to use your energy to help folks in Eastern Kentucky, because just as Representative Blanton said earlier, I do believe this is going to be something that we deal with more frequently in the future. So in saying that, I know in my community, I've seen a great use of apple red, where during the flood we have seen our team of lawyers who brilliantly have helped to fill out paperwork prior to deadlines, help in situations spoken about earlier when contractors come in and take advantage of these folks who have already been stricken with tragedy, steps to help them with restitution in those instances. Have you created any type of link with your emergency management systems either locally or at the state level, to where we can maybe extend some of those services to people in Eastern Kentucky? Because like I said, when you talk about folks who are already embedded and trusted in the community, I would imagine your system in Letcher County is very similar to ours in Floyd County. So do you work with your local emergency management systems?
In turn for like legal representation, we do not currently, but we do work with Apple Red. So actually, we have worked with Apple Red. We've helped some folks locally that are in Letcher County in their FEMA appeals, and also actually in Perry County as well. So we have done some FEMA appeal work. We were sort of hampered in our ability immediately to provide kind of new legal services after the 22 floods. It took us a while to get into it because our office building was completely destroyed. And so we're several of our attorneys, either their immediate family or their houses were flooded. And so we were a little capacity strapped just because of having been in the midst of it. But we are certainly trying to connect with our local emergency managers now to figure out, what can we help with? What kinds of projects can we work on together?
Wonderful, thank you. Because like I said, I think we've seen in Floyd County that Apple Red has really, extended a lot of the services that are needed, and with capable people who are capable of helping in the ways that are required following the flood. So thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
right, seeing no further questions. Is it getting the date for our next meeting? 1808. All right, that will do it for this meeting then. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Very, very good information. And that will do it for this meeting for the Disaster Prevention and Resiliency Task Force. Our next meeting will be on the 8th of next month, and Madam Co-Chair Webb will be chairing that meeting. And don't have the time for that, but we'll have that information out soon. So thank you for attending today, and we'll see you soon.